Live everywhere.
Daily Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Waldman. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hello, how you doing? Good morning, everybody. It is Wednesday, September 13th, 2017. Everything looks to be on the up and up so far. I'm going to turn up the volume on my own headphones just a little bit so I can hear myself. It does help every once in a while if you can hear yourself speak. I don't know whether it helps if you can hear yourself think, necessarily. That's what usually people are worried about, but I don't know. It's a radio show, and so I thought it might be worthwhile to listen in just a little bit and see what I was up to. Bill knows. He's all the way in Portland, Maine, and somehow he's figured out the day's show as he does each morning. Daily Co's Radio is live now. This is a warning to you. Tweeted out by Bill. True fact, Kagro X, that's me. Hi. David Waldman, your host. How you doing? Kagro X has liked, and that's in scare quotes, 100% less Twitter porn than Senator Ted Cruz. So far, still true. That could change at any moment, of course. We reported on the story just a little bit. We didn't cover it a great deal yesterday. Is that what happened? Was it Twitter-based porn? Or I thought he, did something on Facebook with... Who cares? I mean, I didn't follow it that closely. And I believe he blamed it on an intern, as I figured he would. And, of course, somebody naturally went with the headline that Ted Cruz fingers intern on this thing. I mean, ugh. It was inevitable, I guess. I still don't really understand exactly what happened with the whole situation, except that somebody pressed the wrong button. I always have that fear vicariously, I guess, for people who administer web pages or Twitter accounts for some corporate entity or some other outside organization, and they have both accounts on their phone, that somebody's going to make a mistake. Well, the porn thing doesn't necessarily enter into it every time, but just that you might accidentally send a message that was personal in nature, and not private necessarily, but just something you meant to say to your friends and say it on the wrong account, and people are beginning to wonder why the company you work for is telling somebody that they'll meet them at the movies at 9:30, and that's the best kind of mistake you could possibly make with these things. The other one, of course, would be sharing your personal porn preferences with the world. And, of course, that could have been a mistake that Ted Cruz made. That's true. Well, we don't really know, and we may never find out. And that would be fine with me. I'm happy to leave that story exactly where it lies right now, unless, he has been kind of vocal about the evils of all of that stuff, and so, I don't know. Somebody's head's got to roll on that, and it'll probably be someone. I mean, I find it hard to believe that somebody else would make that mistake on his behalf, but I also find it hard to believe that he's spending his time that way in the middle of, I don't know, was it middle of the night, middle of the day? You know, he's got to have some off hours. I can't believe I'm expressing sympathy for Ted Cruz over anything. I really shouldn't even bother. Okay. Well, anyway, there's plenty of other news today. Some interesting stuff. We'll see what Greg has rounded up for us. No doubt it includes very likely a lot of the fun things that I have seen fly by this morning on Twitter. Some long reads, some quicker hits. New York Times has a rather amazing piece on the Russian tactics now coming to light. I'll bet that's in his collection. Oh, I see that the new updated Skype includes room for sponsored advertisements in this window that I'm used to seeing Greg's notes in. But they are rolling in. You can just scroll right by it. A lot of nervy people out there this morning. I tell you, you people expressing your political opinions, which everyone, of course, has the right to do. And we don't want to get in anybody's way. We just we can't shield you from opprobrium if necessary. Chris Kobach, one of them. Apparently, this guy just can't be stopped. He will not, no matter how often he's called out, stop lying about voter fraud. And we really need to catch up on the allegations he has leveled against voters in New Hampshire, in particular. For whatever reason, he's zeroed in on that, and it's an easy and demonstrable lie. Amazingly, lots going on in the background of his horrible voter suppression commission. Hans von Spakovsky has wormed his way back into this situation. We'll update you on that. And I found something very interesting today as I was reading through my Twitter feed this morning. Will Bunch retweeting Scott Paterno complaining about I don't even know what. He was upset about the use of the term racist, that people were throwing it around indiscriminately, and when you do that, you cheapen the term, and some of you all should be ashamed of yourself. He used a y'all. It's a Pennsylvania y'all. It does happen in the wild from time to time. I didn't know who Scott Paterno was, and I guess he's actually a Republican political consultant in his own right, in addition to being Joe Paterno's son. I didn't know there were still like mouthy Paternos in the world. That's straight. I'm not part of the cult of Penn State, so I don't get it, and maybe I'm not from Pennsylvania, and therefore I don't get it. But the idea of being an outspoken Paterno, I don't know. I couldn't do it, but maybe they're just a more resilient breed than I am. Anyway, let's turn to Greg Dworkin, who's got a raft of stories ready to roll. Good morning, Greg. How you doing?
Good morning. Does Scott Paterno represent the Pennsylvania?
That's all. Yeah, that's all there is up there. I guess it must, because y'all is not ordinarily a Pennsylvania thing. But they now. It's the damnedest thing. You see Confederate flags on trucks in Pennsylvania because Gettysburg happened somewhere else, I guess.
And the upper Midwest too.
Yeah.
We need a little adjustment on the sound for the echo. Whatever you did the other day.
This is amazing. It's resetting itself on its own. Let's see. I'll poke around and see what.
Just see if you can remember what you did.
I remember. I just don't understand why it would happen again. But okay.
You didn't put a quarter in the back of the machine like I told you to.
Not. Okay. Let's see. All right. I'll go down my checklist while you begin on yours.
Okay. Well, anyway, I've got the pundit roundup for today, and once again highlighting that Ta-Nehisi Coates article about white presidents, which I think is important. But a lot of it is on the Voting Rights Commission.
Aha, yes. There's a lot
which
of
I think is really
that.
important to do. Of course, I do have a piece, I think that goes back from February in the Monkey Cage blog. We can't find any evidence of voting fraud in New Hampshire.
No? That's amazing.
They went and did it twice. After complaints about it from the Voting Fraud Commission, they went back again and looked at it. And so all this stuff that's going on now about basically students in New Hampshire going to college, and by the way, that fixed it.
Yes.
Students going back to college who happen to have driver's licenses from other states isn't evidence of fraud, even though they claim it is.
You're right, that is not.
But one of the things that I thought was really interesting is a couple of people on the Voting Rights Commission. I don't know if you had a chance to highlight this. I have a storify about it. Paul Waldman was writing about John Lott.
I forgot about. There's an awful lot of fraudsters on this fraud commission, and I figure it's just the Trump doctrine.
Spakovsky, but I want to do Lott because, of course, of his tying with the gun stuff that you are so well versed in.
Yeah.
Washington Post blogger Paul Waldman also writes a column for The Week and at the American Prospect, and he says the fact that serial fraudster John Lott is still called upon as an expert tells you so much about today's conservative movement in the GOP. He made a sock puppet to tout himself. He conducted, quote, air quotes, bunny quotes about conducted, scare quotes, a survey that almost certainly never happened. He claimed to have published an article in a peer-reviewed journal that was actually rejected. Every time he puts out a new study, academics examine it and find it misleading or outright fraudulent, and yet he keeps getting invited to speak at conservative think tanks, appear on their TV shows, and even testify before government commissions. Why? Because they just don't care.
Yeah.
If he's telling them what they want to hear, they don't care if he's a fraud. Now, this at the same time that Mike McDonald and other actual voting experts were asked to testify, and they went over what the testifying would be. In other words, what were you going to say? And it turned out they were going to be independent, so they didn't want them.
Well, even though Trump himself is a maverick independent.
And they think their audiences are too dumb to know the difference, Paul Waldman writes, which is probably true. And so there's more on Lott from Think Progress. But the guy who is a gun nut is now, and I've got this piece from L.A. Times, which is really where the tie-in with guns and voting comes in, oddly enough, because it is odd. Voter Fraud Commission is urged to consider using gun background check system for voter eligibility. And who is proposing this? This same John Lott.
Yes. Background checks for voting, but not guns.
Right. So we'll fix that. We'll just make everybody subject to background checks. I mean, I don't know if he's exactly what he's suggesting. Is everybody supposed to do a DNA test and you can only vote if you're white?
That would probably be their preferred method, yeah, but no one knows what they're proposing because they just throw out talking points and say things and then don't do them.
Yeah, so this is from the L.A. Times. Fueling concerns about the impartiality and seriousness of President Trump's Voter Fraud Commission. I love the way they start that because that is the proper way to describe this thing. Members heard testimony Tuesday from a gun rights advocate who suggested using the background check system for gun purchasers to determine the eligibility of Americans to vote. John Lott, head of the gun rights advocacy group Crime Prevention Research Center, suggested such a process would ease the concerns of those worried about fraudulent voting.
I doubt that's the case.
Of which, as I mentioned in the Monkey Cage blog, there hardly isn't any. And you can't find 2 cases or 3 cases or 50 cases in a country with, 320 million some odd people and say, you see, these 40 cases, these 30 cases, these 3 justify making sure that everybody else's eligibility is questioned, and so we really discourage people from voting. Well, it's just stupid.
John Lott's a dopey guy. I mean, he's clever in a certain sense. I think what he's doing is this is just also for him a backhanded way of trying to get people to say that the gun background check should be thrown out as well, and we can explain that, but I'll skip that for the moment, I'll make him a counteroffer. I will accept his proposal so long as he will accept my proposals for voting shows where you can go register the same day and vote without a background check because all of our fun dealers have collected themselves in one convention center, and it's okay. We'll sell votes and voting accessories for anyone who walks in and pays the entrance fee. They can go ahead and vote.
Right.
Is that cool?
So I'm throwing this right at the bottom of my list.
Okay.
This is a tweet from Del Cameron, who is a staff reporter at Gizmodo. Writes about security, politics, and surveillance. Got it. Right. My latest Gizmodo, Jeff Sessions, was lobbied to help exclude Democrats from Trump's election fraud panel. As revealed by newly disclosed documents obtained from the U.S. Department of Justice, the Conservative Heritage Foundation think tank tried to have Democrats, that's what the blurb says, so I guess excluded. Yes. Part of the Heritage email sent to Sessions aide slamming the White House GOP officials and academics for their ignorance. Oh, no. Because they were actually going to have, people who know what they're talking about there. So this was all gotten by Freedom of Information Act stuff. Okay. And the emails say Heritage Foundation is disturbed by news election fraud panel might be bipartisan. Oh, no. Yeah, that's what it comes down to. They didn't want Democrats on this panel. Right. Because who reasons. Wrote that letter that was gotten by Freedom of Information Act? Well, it depends who you ask and when. Yes, Hans von Spakovsky authored the letter, says Heritage. Jawohl. Heritage confirms it. He's on the election fraud panel. The Department of Justice had redacted his name. The Heritage Foundation is scrupulously nonpartisan, it says. Hans von Spakovsky is a former member of the Federal Election Commission and has managed our election law reform initiative for many years. He brings a wealth of knowledge and insight to the discussion of voter fraud and holds strong views on the topic. The views expressed in the email are his own. Oh. Well, so now we know who did it. Jessica Huseman, who is a reporter for ProPublica, national politics reporter, goes to Spakovsky and said, "Did you write this?" He says, "No." Yeah, right. I just recording of him saying no. But then she says, "But Heritage said you did." Heritage hasn't responded yet to a request for further comment. We'll update. Spakovsky is going to say he didn't understand the questions because he didn't personally send a letter to Sessions. Ah, yes. Abby knows she's lying. Right? Right. Hang on, let me take care of that. Oh, she's right.
Yeah, this is a pretty amazing development. No, it isn't. What am I saying? He lied up front. So, okay, that's not amazing at all, but it did happen, and it's upsetting. Anyway, oh boy, there must be something really serious going on there. Someone must have arrived at the home.
Just had to let her out.
Oh.
Out. I already had her out of the room.
Yeah.
But that wasn't enough.
Yeah,
So,
like
what happened
professor.
today is we had a little bit of a nature break here.
Oh.
I had a strange dog wander into my garage this morning.
Really?
And so I was a little late getting up the list for you.
Ah.
And it turned out it was just, from a house down the block, and trailing behind the dog was a boy.
Oh.
Looking for his runaway dog.
Oh. Okay.
And trailing behind him, he was about 10 or 11 years old, and trailing behind him was like a 9-year-old brother.
Everybody was
And
lost.
this big, strong dog. I have a dog as well, of course, Abby and the dog were playing, but this, large dog was a little aggressive, not terribly so, but, to the point where Abby likes to play with strange dogs for about 5 minutes, then she's had enough.
Mm-hmm.
So I got a leash. I put it on the dog, who's, by the way, his name is Hobbs, very nice dog. And when the boys showed up at my house, we figured that maybe I should walk the dog back, because this is like a big, strong dog.
I guess so.
And I did, and I walked it around the block and met the family, very nice folks, and changed leashes and, got the dog settled and all of that. And the dad said, the dog ran.
Yeah.
And so why did he run? He said, well, it was that bear across the street.
Oh. That one.
Like there's been a black bear in our neighborhood that's been wandering around various and sundry streets, and the kids didn't see it. The dog did, and the dog ran, and the kids ran after the dog. So I guess indirectly, from leading from behind, the dog helped, keep the kids away from the bear.
Good idea. Well, the bear was off his leash too.
Yeah. So if Abby barks, you never know what it is.
Right. Well, that's true.
Thank
The
you.
bear,
We had
by
to
the
go
way, denies having been there.
Yeah.
This just in.
Yeah.
But we
Anyway,
didn't put him on the
so
voting commission.
that happened a couple of days ago, and then this morning the dog just showed up again in the garage. So I had to.
Oh, I see. Found his way back.
But I knew who Hobbs was, and I knew where he lived, so it was easy to get him back to his proper home.
Did you see a bear?
So that's why I was a little delayed this morning. And now when she was barking, I just had to go out and make sure it wasn't Hobbs again.
Or a bear.
Or a bear.
Okay.
So anyway, you have this situation where Hans von Spasskovsky is screwing things up and then denying it, and Heritage is kind of caught with their pants down. I guess I shouldn't say that given Ted Cruz.
Right.
But and the whole story here is part of how they try to make this a complete and total partisan deal while complaining about the fact that nobody takes them seriously, and there's so many issues. Why can't we address this in a bipartisan manner?
Yes.
And if it's part and parcel of why Democrats really, whatever deals they make, like with Chuck and Nancy, it sounds like a TV show that should be on.
Right.
Whatever deals they make, it's got nothing to do with Democrats being willing to work with Donald Trump or give him the benefit of the doubt. It just ain't happening.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great example and a great thing to keep in mind. We keep bending over backwards, thinking everyone in the country will obviously see how fair and open-minded and patient we're being if we just agree. And despite all evidence that anything bipartisan is going to work, if we just say, well, we'll split things evenly, we'll work in a bipartisan fashion, etc. And now
We
you
will,
find
but not
out,
with Trump and not with his
right.
people.
Yeah, his guys are off in the corner insisting, no, you can't even have Democrats, even as a minority addition to this panel. There can't be any Democrats on this thing or they'll just screw it up.
And Donald Trump didn't just become president, and he didn't pivot, and that's not happening, so let's just give that up.
Yeah, please.
Meanwhile, how are the Democrats doing? Well, there were Oklahoma and New Hampshire special elections for state elections.
Yes.
And as Harry Enton points out, Dems picking up special election seats in Oklahoma and New Hampshire, but more impressive is the swing from 2012 to 2016.
Yeah. I heard
Jeffrey
about this.
Skelly, a political scientist, University of Virginia, says these have outperformed Clinton's margin by average of 13 points, Obama's by 8, in 35 D versus R federal state legislative special elections since Trump's election. And this particular one in Oklahoma was a 31-point swing.
Oklahoma.
In a district that had gone convincingly to Trump.
Well, not for long.
Now, the midterm races may not see as large a shift, but the shift is there.
Yeah, well.
So it's a good environment for Democrats, and all of that needs to be kept in mind. So when people start lecturing you about how, well, if Democrats really want to win, what they have to do is be conservative Republicans, white male conservative Republicans, and naturally you didn't win in 2016, don't pay attention.
Well, I rarely do pay attention to that, but yeah, special elections are a weird thing and a strange case. But
But if they keep happening in one direction, then you know that they keep happening in one direction, and then you'll just have to wait till 2018 and see what it means.
Yeah, that's less than satisfying, perhaps. But anyway, we can celebrate these wins and watch the election nuts enjoy them too, and enjoy them vicariously that way.
Yeah, and it's again, you're going to have to keep in mind that when you talk to conservative Republicans, even center-right moderate Republicans,
who now?
Who exist? The Never Trumpers and people like that. They're always going to tweak you and say, yeah, well, actually, thank you for your analysis, but you're stupid because 2016 and Trump won. It's a black swan. It's a one-off. And until there's that next election where the Republicans don't win, it's just the way it is. It's like, bragging rights after the Red Sox beat the Yankees. You just have to suck it up and take it because it's going to be true till the Yankees beat the Red Sox.
I guess, except the Red Sox did win. I mean, there is that. Trump didn't win, so I don't know what to tell you.
Exactly. Does that make them a better team? Does it make them a better team this year? Well, maybe. They're ahead by a couple games, but maybe not. We'll see what happens when they meet in the playoffs.
If the Sox
but,
win
just as a Yankees fan, I have to understand that they got bragging rights because they did win, and so that's just the way it goes. Cleveland, on the other hand, is on their way to maybe winning their 21st game, so that's a cool thing, too. Still America's game. I could care less about football. Anyway, let's get back to single payer, which we haven't gotten to yet, because I think that's awfully important. Bernie's going to introduce his bill today. And I think the important thing to do is understand that the bill's going nowhere, but that doesn't matter. Emma Sando, who's an expert on all things health and policy, tweets the preemptive single payer hot take. The policy really doesn't matter right now. It's about a general idea and belief. And if you want to look at Overton windows as being real, the idea that if you start talking about something at the edges of acceptability and keep talking about it, eventually you pull people over to include that edge within the center, and now all of a sudden you have a permission structure to talk about things that you didn't want to talk before. I don't think that it always applies. I think it's over-applied by a lot of folks to justify radical, ridiculous stuff. But in this particular case, you've got single payer. Single payer has been on the table for discussion ever since the Affordable Care Act has been proposed, passed, and attacked thereafter. And what happens? You got Max Baucus talking about how, well, single payer may not be such a bad idea.
Yeah.
You got Joe Manchin from West Virginia saying, well, we really ought to consider it. I'm skeptical, but, I don't mind at least looking at it. And that's what Overton window shifting means.
Yes, it does.
Probably the best possible example I could think of how that works. So if Bernie proposes something that doesn't have a lot of fleshed out policy to it, it doesn't matter. You don't need a policy now. Clinton and Obama disagreed in 2008 about the best way to go ahead with health care, but what they agreed on is go ahead with health care. And the Affordable Care Act came out of it, and of course Clinton said and Obama, said and agreed that, eventually some of Clinton's proposals wound up in Obama's proposals. That's how it works. So if you wind up putting the marker out there that what single payer is to Democrats is something we want to strive for, perhaps it's wrong. Perhaps what they really should do is properly say what we really want is universal health care, but that's just not as sexy a selling point when you're talking to people. So as a concept, just put the marker there. Don't worry about whether it's single payer or universal health care. And don't worry about the fact that there aren't a lot of details, because the non-Bernie Sanders policy wonks who like to work on this stuff will work out the details. Dare I say it, the Max Baucuses of the world, the committee people, they actually do this stuff. It's what they do.
Yeah.
They're not real interesting because of it, and so they're not the ones running for president.
Yeah.
But they get the work done.
Yes, when people decide that it's work that needs to be done. And
Which
that's
is the
work of
difference
Bernie Sanders.
between Democrats and Republicans, and thank you for highlighting that, because it's exactly my next point. This is not a mirror image of repeal and replace. which was an empty slogan that was never meant to be anything more than a bumper sticker.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean,
if in 2018, as I was just saying with those special elections, if Democrats wind up being able to have a majority somewhere, whether it's House or Senate, and therefore can set the agenda, which is so important to getting policy done, then the Senate or House or both, probably House more than Senate, can return to what John McCain likes to call regular order, where the committees actually do the work. And that's not a bad place to want to go to from where we are right now.
Not at all. Yeah, I know there's a lot of criticism of there not being a great deal of detail in the Sanders proposal. This is the good long read explanation of why that's not a problem. And it doesn't trouble me a great deal at this point. Because,
Nor
of
me,
course,
even though I think, there's nothing to it.
Had it been, there may not be. But yeah, if at this point, if he had fleshed out an entire plan, details top to bottom, I mean, it would be impressive. But then the complaint would be, what? Nobody else gets a seat at the table? Bernie Sanders dictates this now? So there's always going to be a gripe about it, obviously. But it's got to be an inclusive process. And you know how it starts? Proposing a bill and inviting people to the process. So
exactly. And so we should remind people, because it's been so long, that that's actually how it's supposed to work. Yes. This is a nice piece from Sam Baker.
Before we get too far into it, our break is coming up. I'll play our music, but why don't you tease that as we go out into break?
What Bernie's single-payer bill means and what it doesn't. From Axios, we'll be back with that discussion.
Okay, that's an excellent teaser. We've got, all right, we'll be back after our first of a few station breaks for station identification in just a moment.
Thank you.
Welcome back to the Kagro in the Morning Show on Netroots Radio. After our first station identification break, we're back with Greg Dworkin, who has a bear in his house or something like that.
Just down the block. Let's not exaggerate.
Right, okay. Well, why would anybody do that? By the way, I don't know if you know this, but it is the most fantastic, hugest bear of the century, I think, has actually moved in, and you have Donald Trump to thank for that. They used to have small bears. Now they have gigantic dinosaur-sized bears. This is progress.
Right. So natural disasters are things to be graded on, as if you were talking about sports events. I noticed that he does that.
Yes.
Sam Baker used to work at National Journal, and then when it slimmed down, a lot of the National Journal people, some stayed, but a lot of them went other places. And Sam Baker went to Axios. He's a healthcare policy reporter expert, center-right, but very accurate. He's kind of like Pete Williams when you hear, police stories. You tend to believe him because he's got a lot of credibility. Okay. And he has a piece here, what Bernie's single payer means and what it doesn't, from Axios. Single payer isn't going anywhere in either direction. It's not going to pass anytime soon, obviously. But after today, it's also not going to go away anytime soon. Bernie Sanders will introduce his Medicare for All legislation today, and in addition to Sanders, 4 more of Democrats' top 2020 prospects, Cory Booker, Kirsten Gillibrand, Kamala Harris, and Elizabeth Warren, have already signed on as co-sponsors. The bottom line, this is a big deal, but if it's time to take single-payer seriously as a political concept, it's also come time to start grappling with the policy. Single-payer means different things to different people, but for so many powerful, valuable Democrats to endorse just the conceptual idea of single-payer is still a huge political shift. That's that Overton window I was talking about.
Yes.
Even if some of them are only doing it because they feel like they have to, it's arguably a bigger change. It wasn't that long ago you had to say you oppose single-payer if you wanted to be taken seriously as a presidential candidate. But here are the policy problems. Nobody has a clear vision of what single-payer actually means. No one other than Sanders cares how Sanders' bill answers the questions. Democrats co-sponsoring Sanders' bill will almost certainly treat it as a political proxy, a broad statement of support for a vaguely defined goal rather than specific policy endorsement. Where each Democrat ends up could be very different and could stop far short of true single-payer. Even Medicare for All isn't true single-payer. Most Medicare beneficiaries buy private supplemental coverage to fill the gaps. That's why there's a Medigap. That's why there's Medicare Advantage. These are separate programs that are designed to fill in that gap. Its drug benefit is largely privately administered. Whether it's Medicare for All, Medicare buy-in, Medicaid buy-in, all payer utilizing Medicare as a negotiator, the constant theme will be policies that work constructively and aggressively to leverage the power of the federal government, said Chris Jennings, a veteran Democratic healthcare strategist. No one, including Sanders, has truly reckoned with how to pay for whatever system they might support. As Atrios points out, remember, healthcare has to be paid for, not wars.
Yes, well, we don't do that.
Nobody cares about that because who cares about the deficit? But when it comes to healthcare, you have to pay for that.
Yeah, I learned in school that wars cost butter, but
Yeah.
I don't think that's really true.
Well, but they also cost guns. And you can't have guns and butter at the same time because that's a reference that I'm going to finish my segment with,
Drop
actually.
the gun.
There's still political risk here. Single payer feels like it has a lot of momentum because so many potential presidential candidates are now supporting it. But Senate Democrats up for re-election next year in red states aren't signing on. That's where you look at a Heidi Heitkamp and see where she's at. Or even a Joe Manchin, just to figure out where they're at. Even House Speaker Nancy Pelosi. I mean, you don't always have to be up for election in a red state to get a sense of where red state Democrats are at. Mm-hmm. Even House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, who has said in the past she'd love single payer, is also trying to win the House next year, declined to back Sanders' bill and said it's not a litmus test for Democrats. I think what she said was something along the lines of, I'm too busy defending the Affordable Care Act, which is a reasonable position to be right now, given that they're still trying to sabotage it. Yeah. Any form of single payer would require enormous tax increases, and as long as Democrats are in that ballpark, the details are all the same to Republicans.
I guess that's true.
The bill Sanders is introducing today doesn't just have a long way to go before becoming law. It's not even really on that road. It has a long way to go before single payer starts to represent a specific vision and one that down-ballot Democrats want to entertain. But having Booker, Harris, Gillibrand, and Warren all on board is a step in that direction. As long as the different approaches recognize they have a common denominator, which, by the way, is universal health care, not single payer, I think it can be quite effective, Jennings said. And that's why I was trying to explain on Twitter yesterday to some people that got it, like Charles Gaba, and some people that didn't, that, believe it or not, Bernie Sanders' single-payer bill is incremental.
Well, that's true.
It is, because it's going to start the process
writes the whole thing.
of everything that we just talked about in terms of how things actually get done with committee and regular order. It's going to take forever, or feel like forever. But you got to start somewhere, and this is a good start. Well, so I don't mind that he put it in there, even though it doesn't have anything to it.
Yeah. No, I have no objection, certainly. I mean, even if he ends up writing the whole thing by himself, the fact that it's not written yet means this is an incrementalist step towards writing it.
Right. And so you radicals out there, you're all incrementalists. Sorry.
It's okay. Don't worry about it. Incrementalism
You're on the same
works.
team as we are. Let's move forward. Let's move the ball down the field and see how many home runs we get.
Okay.
because the whole thing is to see if we can score that goal, right? So good luck, Cleveland. I hope you get that 21st win.
What the hell? I hope it too. I don't know. Who they playing? I don't know.
Who cares?
I don't know. Maybe I should look into that.
Doesn't really matter who they play. They're just supposed to win. Anyway, so that's the status
Cleveland
of what's going on here.
Yes.
And then I just want to leave this one last thing for you, which is completely, now for something completely different.
Okay.
This is from the Daily 202, and it's a reminder this Sunday. That
yes.
Ken Burns documentary is coming on Vietnam.
Oh, okay. Not Ken Bone. His documentary doesn't come out yet.
He's done. He's finished. So, we saw the Civil War and World War II, and now we're going to relive some of the things that I'm old enough to remember.
That's a scary thought. Like, oh my God, I was alive during the last Ken Burns documentary. I mean, for the actual events. Guns
and butter.
Wow.
So this is from the Daily 202. Of course, that stands for the Washington, D.C. area code.
Yes.
From James Hohman from the Washington Post. McCain and Kerry outline lessons from Vietnam after watching new Ken Burns documentary. Really interesting piece here. A bunch of Washington insiders, hundreds. Okay. Yes. And I don't know what the proper term is for Washington insiders. You get together a bunch of crows. It's a murder of crows. It's an exaltation of larks, the Venery game. A leap of leopards, a pride of lions. I don't know what you call Washington insiders when you gather them together.
Yeah, I don't know. That's a good question.
Right?
Maybe
is it a shadow of Washington insiders?
Oh, could be. A deep state of, I don't know. Yeah, good question.
Or a payment. Is that what you call the group? Anyway, there must be some term for the group, and our listeners are more than happy to have them send in some suggestions there. Anyway, hundreds of Washington insiders gathered last night at the Kennedy Center for an advanced screening of Ken Burns' new documentary on Vietnam. Before he showed half a dozen choice clips from his 10-part, 18-hour film, which premieres Sunday, the director asked everybody who served in the military during the war to stand so they can be recognized.
Mm-hmm.
McCain and Kerry were among those who rose, along with other famous veterans like Bob Kerry, different spelling,
yes,
and Mike Mullen. Burns then asked anyone who protested Vietnam to also stand, and dozens did. And the director looked at them and said, "I can't tell the difference." And the veterans, including McCain, joined the audience in applauding the anti-war demonstrators. That moment set a tone of reconciliation and harmony for a discussion about one of the darkest and most divisive chapters, Missouri, Nevada, one of the most divisive chapters in American history.
Yeah, that's a pretty remarkable thing. And, of course, John Kerry stood for both, probably. So,
yeah, 42 years after the fall of Saigon, McCain believes it was the right time to take notes. There has to be a period of time after a conflict where the passion cools, he said during a panel that followed the screening. Maybe we can look back at the Vietnam conflict and make sure we don't make the same mistake we did before. The 81-year-old, who's undergoing chemotherapy as he battles against an aggressive form of brain cancer, said that watching the magnificent work reminded him of just how young so many of the Americans were who died. He talked about the 18, 19, 20-year-old kids who had no idea what they were getting into. Their leaders didn't lead, whether they were military or civilian, by telling the American people one thing, which was not true, about the progress in the war and the body counts. It caused a wave of pessimism to go across the country, which bolstered the anti-war movement. We can learn lessons today because the world is in such turmoil. Tell the American people the truth. Didn't we just talk about this voting commission that was set up for bogus reasons?
yes, there's a lot
And
of
many
problems
other
with
things the Trump administration does. So there's definitely resonance there. McCain said he visits the Vietnam veterans memorial as often as he can, weekly, often. And he says these young men died because of inadequate or corrupt leadership. We need to be able to have leaders who will lead and who will be able to give the troops a path to victory, so will not sacrifice them ever again in a lost cause. Keep that in mind when we talk about North Korea.
That is true. I would like to have heard a little something about, given the spirit of the way the event began, a little something about maybe a little more seriousness and tolerance for protest at the outset as well.
Mm-hmm.
That would have been nice.
So Kerry talked about that just a little bit, but
Right. Yeah, leave it to Kerry. I mean, you couldn't have there's no permission structure in it from Kerry. I want the permission of John McCain.
Well, Kerry recounted his work with McCain in the 90s to normalize relations with Vietnam and how you get out of that box. And so we'll see.
Okay. McCain's busy.
But just keep in mind, more than this story and more than them talking in a setting that only Washington insiders saw, this documentary will be on starting Sunday. And if it's like the other two, chances are it's going to be something people talk about, like Sharknado and Game of Thrones and all the other stuff that you can't avoid coming across. This is just one of those things that people will talk about.
All right.
And that is the place for the part that you just talked about, not so much, whether McCain and Kerry said it at a setting that only Washington insiders heard.
True. Although, I don't know, we seem to fetishize those insider conversations in some way, but I'll take it where I can get it. It just needs to happen. And
it does.
McCain's got his hands full at the moment, but there are others who could speak for him.
Yep. Anyway, so there's that. By the way, I don't think that Graham Cassidy last gasp attempt to repeal and replace is going anywhere. There simply aren't the votes for it in the Senate, so I don't think we have to spend a whole lot of time with that other than to acknowledge its existence.
Okay. Well, people are saying it exists. It doesn't, but, the idea exists. It, too, is not written.
Right. There's a story in the AP that Leonard Lance, one of the Tuesday Group people, moderate Republican, is considering retiring. It's an R+3 district.
Okay.
And so I think there's just more and more of this sense from a lot of different people that, there's some kind of inflection point that's been turned with Trump. And no, people aren't looking at he handled the hurricanes okay, which is to say stayed out of trouble and let FEMA deal with it. He didn't become presidential. His numbers really haven't changed all that much. And no, he's not going to get reelected.
Well, I should hope not. And he didn't really handle the hurricanes all that well at all. But I mean, he didn't do anything, so I guess he didn't ruin anything either.
Well,
but,
the U.S. limited the death toll in 2 monster storms, says the New York Times, and that's really going to be the story.
Right.
And just like the
States did
economy,
that.
presidents will take credit for it, whether they had anything to do with it or not.
Yes,
But at the same time, the Russia probe.
there is that.
It's heating up. There's plenty of stories about how the White House is getting really nervous because it looks like Mueller is closing in on both obstruction of justice and previous Trump deals that Trump wanted to make off limits for looking.
Yes.
And so you got to figure there's money laundering there, and we'll see how that plays out. But something's going to happen.
Yeah, something is going to happen. I got a hint yesterday from yesterday's show that before this is all over, if it happens this way, we're going to look really good because we brought this story up a long time ago. We don't break stories. Let me just insist on that again. But reading, there's going to be old Kagro in the Morning shows that we'll be able to pull out and say, oh my God, I can't believe this was connected. It seems more and more likely to me that the weird FIFA soccer, World Cup corruption story is finding its way back into the Trump-Russia timeline. It's the strangest thing, but it came up in yesterday's review of the Steele dossier. What I wasn't aware of was that Chris Steele actually was big in gathering the intelligence and providing the information to the FBI and prosecuting that case. I had forgotten that 2 of the arrested FIFA officials lived in Trump Tower right up until 2015, and I had also forgotten that, hey, do you know where the World Cup is being held in 2018? You have a wild guess about where that might have been?
No, is that the one that's supposed to be in Qatar or something?
That is 2022. Qatar is also an odd place.
2018? No, I haven't been paying attention.
And
to
if I could say to you, all right, well, I have a feeling that the Trump-Russia story was going to intermingle with FIFA because the FIFA officials who got arrested lived in Trump Tower, rented a whole floor of Trump Tower for their association.
So you're saying it's in Boston?
Yes, exactly. And the one American official who flipped, by the way, and started giving the FBI evidence is now dead. That's weird.
Well, they do have a habit of showing up dead.
They do, and the World Cup being held in Russia in 2018, mysteriously, all the contracting and concessions and construction of the stadia and transportation, logistics, all of that stuff, of course, not really worth all that much money, so it's a little hard to understand why they would want it in Russia. But I don't know. I think these 2 storylines are going to converge in a weird way, and as it turns out, they already have. And I just want to point that out. I had forgotten about that, and it came up again yesterday. I don't know why I needed to tell you that, but you're okay with soccer, right? I know you're a baseball fan, but
I am. I'm fine with soccer.
Okay, corrupt
especially
soccer
when it's
in
got a
Russia
hint of scandal about
next
it.
year. Yep. Ooh, it'll be exciting.
Yep. Okay. Anyway, with that's my summary for today. A little of this, a little of that. But thank you so much for tolerating my calling in the morning and fixing my voice. And thanks, of course, to Justice and all the other people behind the scenes who make this happen, including Scott Anderson, who writes this up. Take care, and I will talk to you tomorrow.
All right. Very good. Thanks, Greg. A good start. We also have some suggestions here. You'll see them. Perhaps in your Twitter feed, Michael Musson suggesting some ideas for your question about what to call a group of insiders convened for these purposes. Let's see. He suggests a corruption of lobbyists, a pretension of insiders, also a party of insiders, and a clique of insiders. I think a party of insiders works pretty well in terms of the double entendre, but and a corruption of lobbyists is very specific as well. Good work, I think, there. By the way, another comment here, one from Michael, who says the bear is the bear in your neighborhood. The bear is an example of somebody who's done an amazing job and is being recognized more and more, I notice. That's true. You can start calling the bear Fred. And Bill noting here, true fact, and I'll take his word for it on this one. It's a little unbelievable, but he says it's true, so that's supposed to be our social signal that it is unbelievable but true. I ran into Ken Bone wandering around at Netroots Nation in Atlanta. Strange. And it is a true fact that it is strange. I will definitely grant that one. What would Ken Bone be doing? Well, anywhere, really, honestly. I can't believe that guy's a phenomenon. How did he get to Netroots Nation? Like, why did that happen? For what purpose? For what purpose does the gentleman rise? One might ask why he showed up at Netroots Nation at all, but I guess, he's clearly politically interested. I don't think that the political orientation of the event meshed with where he was, but I don't know. Maybe he's just now spending every free moment investigating political movements now that he's a phenomenon in his own right. But he was a phenomenon for not being particularly, interesting or interested in anything. I don't know. The Ken Bone phenomenon, I guess I just don't understand. But, welcome, Ken. I hope it was interesting. I do wonder how he got there, or whether somebody sponsored his trip there, or whether he just said, I'd be curious of what goes on there. And imagine what a boost it would be for the profile of Netroots Nation. I mean, just that it rises to the level that somebody like Ken Bone, who appeared to have no idea whatsoever what the hell was going on in politics in any way, shape, or form, could find his way to Netroots Nation on his own. Well, good advertising scheme there for the folks behind the scenes at Netroots Nation. You reached Ken Bone, and that's more than the presidential campaigns were able to do with their big budgets. So I'd take it as a good sign. Okay, let's see. Anything that absolutely has to make the agenda today that I don't think we would otherwise get to when we speak with Joan later on? I don't know. It's hard to tell. She's, of course, going to be up on all the latest news. We'll be concentrating, I'm sure, on what she's been writing about going on in Congress and the single-payer phenomenon, and all of that. We'll absolutely be returning to that. Let's see. Maybe I ought to bring this one up. I mentioned it up at the top of the show, but it's a long read, I understand, and I don't think we'll get all the way through it, but looks to be interesting, important, and being shared by all the interesting and important people out there who make Twitter such a fun place to hang out. The New York Times piece from Jim Rutenberg, which came highly recommended by a number of people I follow and a number of people that the people I follow retweet. RT, which is not retweet, but Russia Today was the old name of the network. RT, Sputnik, and Russia's new theory of war. How the Kremlin built one of the most powerful information weapons of the 21st century and why it might be, maybe, impossible to stop. Uh-oh. That sounds troubling. And I have a feeling he might be right about that. Sputnik's in trouble with our government nominally until, of course, the Russia-loving president that we have gotten stuck with puts a stop to it. But let's dive in we'll at least get through some of the lead and get the flavor of this thing, and you can decide if it's something you want to spend some time reading on your own later on. Martin Steltner showed up at his office in the State Courthouse building in Western Berlin. Steltner, who has served for more than a dozen years as the spokesman for the Berlin State Prosecutor, resembles a detective out of classic crime fiction. Crisp suit, wavy gray hair, and a gallows humor that comes with having seen it all. There was the 2009 case of the therapist who mistakenly killed two patients in an ecstasy-infused session gone wrong. The ecstasy was probably where that went wrong. The great poker heist of 2010, in which masked men stormed a celebrity-studded poker tournament with machetes and made off with $250,000. And the 2012 episode involving the Canadian porn star who killed and ate his boyfriend and then sent the leftovers home in the mail. That's not even polite. How would a Canadian do that? Steltner embraced the oddball aspect of his job. He kept a picture of Elvis Presley on the wall of his office. That's a pretty good stand-in for porn cannibalism, I guess. But even Steltner found the phone calls he received that morning confounding. What could possibly confound Steltner? They came from police officers from towns far outside Berlin who reported that protests were erupting seemingly out of nowhere on their streets. They are demonstrating Save Our Children. No attacks from immigrants on our children, and some things like that. Steltner told me when I met him in Berlin recently. The police were calling Steltner because this was ostensibly his office's fault. The protesters were angry over the Berlin prosecutors' supposed refusal to indict 3 Arab migrants who, they said, raped a 13-year-old girl from Berlin's tight-knit Russian-German community. Steltner, who would certainly have been informed if such a case had come up for prosecution, had heard nothing of it. He called the Berlin Police Department, which informed him that a 13-year-old Russian-German girl had indeed gone missing a week before. When she resurfaced a day later, she told her parents that 3 Southern-looking men, by which she meant Arab immigrants, had yanked her off the street and taken her to a rundown apartment where they beat and raped her. But when the police interviewed the girl, whose name was Lisa, she changed her story. She had left home, it turned out, because she had gotten in trouble at school. Afraid of how her parents would react, she went to stay with a 19-year-old male friend. The kidnapping and gang rape, she admitted, never happened. By then, however, the girl's initial story was taking on a life of its own within the Russian-German community through word of mouth and Facebook, enough so that the police felt compelled to put out a statement debunking it. Then, over the weekend, Channel 1, a Russian state-controlled news station with a large following among Russian Germans who watch it on YouTube and its website, ran a report presenting Lisa's story as an example of the unchecked dangers Middle Eastern refugees posed to German citizens. Angela Merkel, it strongly implied, was refusing to address these threats even as she opened German borders to hundreds of thousands of migrants. According to Lisa's parents, the Channel 1 reporter said, the police simply refused to look for criminals. You getting the idea of how this stuff works even outside of the United States? The following day in Berlin, Germany's far-right National Democratic Party held a protest at a plaza in Marzahn, a heavily Russian neighborhood. The featured speaker was an adult cousin of Lisa's who repeated the original allegations while standing in front of signs reading, "Stop Foreign Infiltration" and "Secure Borders." The crowd was tiny, not much more than a dozen people, but it was big enough to attract the attention of RT, Russia's state-financed international cable network, which presents local language newscasts in numerous countries, including Germany and the United States. A crew from the network's video service, Ruptli, arrived with a camera. The footage was on YouTube that afternoon. Same day, Sputnik, a brash Russian government-run news and commentary site that models itself on BuzzFeed, it's a working model, right, ran a story raising allegations of a police cover-up. Lisa's case was not isolated, Sputnik argued. Other refugee rapists, it warned, might be running free. By the start of the following week, protests were breaking out in neighborhoods with large Russian-German populations, which is why the local police were calling Steltner. In multiple interviews, including with RT and Sputnik, Steltner reiterated that the girl had recanted the original story about the kidnapping and the gang rape. In one interview with the German media, he said that in the course of the investigation, authorities had found evidence that the girl had sex with a 23-year-old man months earlier, which would later lead to a sexual abuse conviction for that man, whose sentence was suspended. But the original unrelated and debunked story continued circulating, drawing the interest of the German mainstream media, which pointed out inconsistencies in the Russian reports. None of that stopped the protests, which culminated in a demonstration the following Saturday, January 23rd, by 700 people outside the Chancellery, Merkel's office. Ruptli covered that too. An official in the Merkel government told me that the administration was completely perplexed at first, and then a few days later, Russia's foreign minister, Sergei Lavrov, held a news conference in Moscow. Bringing up Lisa's story, he cast doubt on the official version of events. There was no way, he argued, that Lisa left home voluntarily. How would he know? Germany, he suggested, was covering up reality in a politically correct manner for the sake of domestic politics. 2 days later, RT ran a segment reporting that despite all the official denials, the case was not so simple. The Russian embassy... Oh, we've had this thing blank out on us as an unresponsive script. That's too bad. Okay. The case was not so simple. The Russian embassy called Steltner and asked to meet, he told me. The German foreign ministry informed him that this was now a diplomatic issue. The whole affair suddenly appeared a lot less mystifying. A realization took hold in the foreign ministry, the intelligence services, and in the chancellery. Germany had been hit. Hit with what? Well, we'll continue with that discussion, at least for a little while, as we head into our next station identification break, just for a moment. And then in our 10 o'clock hour, be visiting, as usual, with Joan McCarter. We look forward to that. We'll be back after this short break. Welcome back once again to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. That worked out well. I'm nice running the music nicely. Everything brings us smoothly back from the break. Okay. And so I'm scrolling through this piece, and it is an extraordinarily long read. Some of you may be wondering, when do we get to the America part of all this? Well, you're ethnocentric, and you should stop it. The whole point of this very interesting lead-in is, of course, well, it's multiple. It works on many fronts. One, the Russian interference is all over the Western world, not just in the United States. And it began elsewhere. It began, of course, in Eastern Europe, and we became aware of it and let our top officials know all about it. And the Ukrainians certainly were interested in making sure that the rest of the Western world knew all about it. And then I'm sure much to their relief, the top officials in the Republican Party in the United States decided they would, though they understood the nature and scope of the threat, would keep their mouths shut because they might get a Republican president who would sign their preferred tax cut bills. And that would mean that they would get more money in their pockets. And that was the price that it took to have Paul Ryan, Kevin McCarthy, and the rest of the Republican leadership who was present in the conversation revealed on tape from last year. That's all it took to get them to sell out the government of the United States. Oh, well, they're very weird people, and they don't care about America. Just as George Bush, it turned out, did not care about black people, Paul Ryan, Kevin McCarthy, and the Republican leadership do not care about America or Americans. So we might as well get that out there on the table. Is that a problem? I don't think we're going to have any objections that I can see, not from our listenership anyway. It goes on, there's at quite some length, this story of the German example. And in the interest of saving time and getting to the point of the story, all we really have to do is look back to yesterday's stories about how the Russians were able to leverage Facebook to organize protests right here in the United States. They too ran into a wall in terms of getting large numbers of people out there, but you can see that it didn't take very long for them to refine their message and get it to where they could raise a crowd of several hundred in Berlin to protest outside the chancellery about a case that didn't really happen the way the Russian propaganda networks said it did. And then, of course, getting around to the ultimate point of the story is contained or hinted at in the headline that Russia has a new theory of war that they built, as it says in the subheader, one of the most powerful information weapons of the 21st century, may be impossible to stop because it plays on the existing and fractious nature of politics in Western democracies and exploits the fringes in ways that empower them and lead them to believe that they have wider support among the mainstream than they really do. And, any number of, at any point in the beginning story about what happened in Berlin, if you had swapped it for the right location in the United States, you could have convinced me that it was people turning out in the streets to to protest Pizzagate. I mean, we had exactly the same thing essentially happen here. It's just a plug-and-play situation for pick a new enemy. It's not that it wouldn't be believed here, especially among the fringe elements in the United States, that migrants of either Arabic descent or Mexican, Central American, South American descent were supposedly responsible for a fake event like this. Or if need be, as ridiculous as it sounds, if your enemy is the campaign staff of the Democratic nominee for president, you can just say they're the ones who are kidnapping children in a weird, violent pedophilia ring and get people to turn out. Not only in protesting and insisting that the story is real, but showing up with semi-automatic weapons at the pizza place, demanding to be admitted to the dungeons where they were keeping the children. Imagine this. Can it happen here? You bet, man. It just did. So, I don't think it should surprise anybody in that sense. All right, well, let's see. What other amazing stories? This one is such a long read. I hesitate to even jump back into the story because following it coherently and reading it chronologically, we're going to be stuck on the German story. I mean, maybe we ought to. I mean, we don't pay attention that often on this show to what's going on in Germany, and they are, by all accounts, the next target of the Russian influence campaign. So but it's just, I wish that this story could be told in a more compact fashion. I may have to spend the day digesting it, and I'm sure the rest of the journalistic community will spend the rest of the day digesting it and picking it apart for more radio-friendly treatment. That won't be their intention, but that's how we'll deal with it when it comes back. But very interesting, certainly, and captures a lot of attention in the journalistic community. Someone will help us digest that by tomorrow. Okay, short update also, something we could discuss perhaps with Joan, a short update on that resolution, the Senate joint resolution that we discussed yesterday, I believe, or possibly the day before. But, I think it was yesterday, proposed in the Senate and passed by unanimous consent in the Senate, calling on the president. And of course, he'll have to either sign or veto or just let this thing pass without his signature by sitting on his desk for 10 days, but calling on him to condemn white supremacists who were active in Charlottesville. The House joined in. They could have simply let the thing languish, but they decided to jump out of the way and get that done. And they also, on a voice vote, as predicted, moved this thing through. The White House so far refusing to say what it's going to do with this resolution. Not that it matters a great deal, but unless they veto it, nothing in particular. There's no different outcome, and I don't really know whether it actually compels the president. I can't see how it compels him to do anything. It's just going to have that suggestion that he condemn white supremacists hang out there unresponded to, which is just as bad as simply vetoing the thing. So I'll take it. I just wanted to update you that the House decided to get the hell out of the way of that hot potato, and now it's landed squarely on Trump's lap, and, he's not going to be able to deal with it properly, I'm sure. Another tidbit of news, Mike Flynn is a corrupt guy and a spy. This, I don't think, goes quite so much to his being a spy as being a corrupt person, but an amazingly, openly, and brazenly corrupt person, and it's amazing that he made it as far as he did. Flynn, apparently, according to Politico, backed a for-profit nuclear scheme inside Trump's transition team. I'm not even sure that makes anything really particularly clear. What do you mean a for-profit nuclear scheme. Well, here's the deal. I'll give you the lead on this one. As a top official in President Donald Trump's transition team, Lieutenant General Michael Flynn actively promoted a private sector scheme to build dozens of nuclear reactors across the Middle East, known informally in the transition as the Marshall Plan, harkening back to the actual Marshall Plan that really did something constructive. But he did not publicly disclose that backers of this bizarre plan had paid him at least $25,000. That would be an important thing to disclose in the interest of honesty and transparency, don't you think? Flynn communicated during the transition with the backers of the for-profit plan, billed as a way of, so exactly what? What did you mean to do with this? Billed as a way of strengthening ties between the U.S. and Arab allies looking to develop nuclear power capability. Are there any? Presumably there are some. Of course, why would they want to develop nuclear power capability? I don't know. They don't want to burn their own oil. I mean, they got lots of oil, and they'd rather export it to other countries and turn that into cash. And they could probably get away with, they're not going to have the same kind of protest that they have in the United States when you look to build a nuclear reactor. Plus, of course, you could put it out in the desert where, I suppose, I wonder about that. What about the logistics of building a nuclear power plant in a desert country like that? You'd want to put it out in the desert so that people wouldn't feel threatened by it. But what about the cooling issue? I mean, you need a lot of water for a nuclear power plant. It's one of the things that they really don't have a great deal of, although they have pretty sizable desalinization plants. Anyway, I won't quibble over the logistics of building a nuclear reactor in the Arabian desert. That's somebody else's job. The point is, some moneyed interest somewhere said it was a good idea, and I don't know. It's a little bit like, it seems like maybe a tall order. But then, of course, I suppose it's possible that some of these countries might say, yeah, well, we want we want nuclear reactors. Why? Nuclear power. Yeah. Not at all for developing nuclear weapons or anything like that. But, okay. I mean, there are different kinds of reactors, but you can build dual-use reactors, and that's a big problem. And it causes a great deal of controversy and whatever. Anyway, for whatever reason, these for-profit nuclear reactor builders wanted the Middle East to sign on, probably because they're cash rich and could pay their bills. And they were paying Flynn $25,000 to really get super excited and he wanted him to like their ideas on Facebook. And they paid him $25,000 to do it and advocated inside of the administration. So Flynn was in touch with them during transition. Meanwhile, the Trump advisor expressed his support for the plan with people inside the transition and discussed its merits with others beyond Trump Tower, according to sources within and close to the Trump team at that time. Flynn's consulting work for the company had been previously reported, but not the extent of his involvement during the Trump transition, nor the full amount he was paid for it. Just by way of getting the names on the record, Flynn first publicly disclosed his consulting work for the Virginia-based venture Exco Dynamics / Iron Bridge Group in a February 11th federal filing, 2 days before he resigned as White House National Security Advisor. That group at the time was working with ACU, a separate entity pushing the project. Flynn did not specify how much he had been paid, and it's unclear whether he might have disclosed that work to White House officials previously. Very interesting detail to have on the guy, and pretty amazing that he would even bother discussing it during the transition. I can't imagine that other officials were terribly interested during the transition, but I mean, of all things to be bringing up as a top subject, like during the transition, which was shortened anyway because nobody expected for them to win, and time was of the essence there. They really had to put an agenda of top priorities together, and this guy's talking about, well, there's a group that wants to, for profit, build nuclear reactors in the Middle East, and we ought to help them do it. Now, what would you need help? What would you help them with? I mean, really, if the Middle Eastern countries wanted it, those of them that are hereditary monarchies, I mean, what's the problem? If they want to build one there, they will, And I thought probably the whole point of building them for a for-profit builder of nuclear reactors. And I don't know if there's any non-profit. Is there a non-profit nuclear reactor sector out there? I doubt it. They probably were interested in building in the Middle East not out of the goodness of their hearts, but rather because there was a cash-rich monarchy saying, I'll give you $1 bazillion to build the thing. What help needed to be given? I don't know. But and what's Marshall planny about it? Seems very odd, but the main takeaway from this, of course, is Michael Flynn, again, stunningly corrupt, and it is amazing that either nobody in the transition or the White House could see this or wanted to see it, I guess, and that does not speak well of their ability to do anything at all in any way, shape, or form, basically. We might as well make it as broad as possible. Okay, so let's see. There's also more work in digesting. Here's an interesting follow-up, maybe for a good background and or substitute for yesterday's story, or and progression on yesterday's story on the story about Russia fomenting protest in the United States, and today's RT Sputnik story in the New York Times, a slightly shorter piece in the Atlantic. David Graham addressing the topic, why would Russia want to foment unrest or protest in the United States? I think it's a pretty easy question to guess at. They basically just thought, why the hell not? If we have a goal, if we're in rivalry in some way, shape, or form with the West, or our systems conflict and we get in one another's way, and it's a battle for power, for control of the balance of power of the world, well, anything we can do to undermine the United States will probably work to our advantage. It seems easy enough to understand. I'm curious about what David Graham's take on this is. And I thought I might at least look at the lead here. Facebook's terse acknowledgement last week that a Kremlin-linked company had spent more than $100,000 spreading divisive social and political messages on the platform practically begged for further revelations. The company declined to publish the contents of the material, and the scope of the operation remained unclear. Already, it's becoming apparent that there was more than met the eye. The Daily Beast reported that Russian operatives using fake identities sought to arrange protests inside the U.S. Facebook told the Beast it had discovered several promoted events and deleted them, though it didn't give any more detail. The fact that Russians were trying to organize real-life events is notable because it represents an attempt to meddle with the election in concrete ways beyond simply spreading information and misinformation. But it also echoes allegations that Russia has made about the U.S. meddling in its affairs and suggests that Russia felt it had the right to do the same. And I don't know how much we've been doing inside of Russia. I'm not that familiar with it. But, I mean, we certainly felt like we were in the right in promoting it. But, I mean, what do we think all of the calls for regime change in these various countries which we've targeted for it was supposed to mean? On Tuesday, Senator Mark Warner, the ranking Democrat on the Senate Intelligence Committee, one of several bodies probing Russian interference in the election, said he wants Facebook and also Twitter to testify about how Russian operatives may have used these platforms as a tool for mischief in 2016. Now, surely, again, here the Russians would probably say, well, we'd like information about whether or not the Americans used, let's say, Twitter and other similar social media platforms as a tool for mischief in the various spring uprisings and color revolutions throughout the world in the years prior to our discovery anyway of their program to do the same here. I mean, were the events of the Arab Spring and the color revolutions not themselves physical manifestations of unrest and protests organized on social media platforms? Now, it had been our impression here in the United States, you and me, the regular consumers of news, our impression was that they were rather more organic movements. But, well, with all of these things coming to light about the Russians doing all this, it seems less easy to simply assume that, well, of course, that's just something Russians do, but we Americans, we would never do such things. Well, we have a pretty long tradition of using our clandestine security services to foment unrest and or outright revolution and coups, whether there was popular support for them or not, at least in our hemisphere anyway, in Central and South America. Were we doing the same elsewhere? I mean, we were cheering for all of these Arab Spring movements and color revolutions. It would be very difficult, I'm sure, as a foreign rival of the United States on the world stage, not to come away with the belief that that the United States was manipulating it. And it would be interesting to find out that it could be just an excuse, but it would be interesting to find out that was the reasoning behind entering into such programs. They're already offering that excuse. It's a question mark, I guess, as to whether we're supposed to believe it or not. It was already widely known that Russian interests sought to use information as a method of political battle. Its tools include well-known state-linked outlets like RT, the part propaganda, part news TV channel sponsored by the Kremlin, and Sputnik. We're on the same subject here in this Atlantic article. Russia dismisses such accusations by arguing that Western media play a similar role in Russia and what it takes as its sphere of influence. See? Russian operatives also use social media accounts, often using the guise of everyday people, to try to spread both pro-Putin spins on real story as well as patently false misinformation. And according to everyone except President Trump and Russia itself, Russian agents were involved in hacking and releasing emails from the Democratic National Committee and the Clinton campaign chair, John Podesta. Maybe one major difference, possibly. I don't know. Well, we'd have to take a look at it. But the United States, at least when it's using its propaganda arms like, I don't know, what do we call it? Radio Free Everything. We've got Radio Liberty, Radio, what do we call the program for Europe? I can't even recall. But we're, I guess, a little bit more open, and it's a little more obviously government propaganda as opposed to, say, individual accounts on social media pretending to be Russian and speaking to Russians as fellow Russians. But, well, I don't know. I don't know if we have the skill to do that. And if we do, whether we would be interested in doing something like that. This is just a great low-budget way for Russians to get to the same ends by slightly different means. Is it more devious? I don't know. It feels that way, but maybe that's just my ethnocentrism talking. Okay. Anyway, you get the gist of this piece here. I don't think there's any new information in it, but it does make the interesting point that Russians likely would be able to point to these things. In fact, we make this point down at the bottom here. Russia has also accused the U.S. of meddling more directly by funding and encouraging civil society groups that foment revolt and rebellion against the Russian government and its clients across the region. During the mid-2000s color revolutions across Eastern Europe, the Kremlin alleged that the U.S. was organizing or encouraging protests that unseated governments. From Moscow, American-funded pro-democracy efforts seem like a targeted threat. In 2007, the Duma alleged that the U.S. was training radical groups inside Russia. The tenor of the accusations became even harsher in 2011 when Putin accused the U.S., and in particular then Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, of organizing or orchestrating protests in the streets of Russia. In 2014, Russia analyst Dmitry Gorenberg told NPR that it was unclear whether the loud protests from the Kremlin were intended largely for domestic consumption, using the U.S. as an outside evil in order to consolidate support for the government, or if Putin and his aides truly believed them. Hard to tell and hard to differentiate between the two, but also an interesting point that this helps explain the particular animosity that Putin may have had for Hillary Clinton, even before he discovered his burgeoning affinity, let's say, for Donald Trump. Okay, now turning to Joan McCarter, who has joined us for the last part of the show today. Hey, Joan, how you doing?
Good morning. I'm fine. How are you?
Okay, pretty good. I think we have all of our technology working today, so that's good news.
It sounds fantastic.
Excellent. And we've got plenty to talk about. There's the ever deepening story of Trump, Russia, the Russians' interests in fomenting dissent in Western democracies all over the world. Big news on that front.
Including Idaho.
Yes. Idaho much in the news in yesterday's round of reporting. It's expanding beyond that, which is probably welcome, I think, for Idahoans who would prefer not to necessarily be the center of that attention. But, that was a weird thing. And I guess that brings us back to the question of, who's helping the Russians target stuff that they could find a problem like this in Twin Falls, Idaho? That's a good question.
Well, Alex Jones.
Yeah. I mean, he's the guy.
There was an incident in Twin Falls. Not a lot of people know this about Idaho, but it has a robust refugee resettlement program.
Yes.
And Twin Falls is one of the areas. Per capita, I think Idaho is one of the states that takes the most refugees, which for the most part has been fantastic for the state. And we have the very prominent immigrant, and I can't think of his name right now, the guy who founded Chobani Yogurt.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I only know him
It's
as the
based
yogurt
here.
guy. Yes.
And has a huge plant in Twin Falls.
Which is
so
usually a
that
good thing.
has caused some dismay among some Idahoans, some Magic Valley residents. It's the Magic Valley. It's called
Yes.
where Twin Falls is located. And
It's a real
there
place.
was an incident where a child was attacked by a group of immigrant kids, boys who were older than her. And I don't remember what the whole story was. Of course, it was conflated into Syrian and Muslim refugee boys rape a child.
Yeah.
And spread all over the fake news, all over InfoWars. That's where, of course, Russia picked it up, and that's where Russia says, okay,
Yeah.
we can foment unrest there. We can try to make this rally happen through Facebook in Twin Falls, this anti-Muslim, anti-immigrant, anti-refugee movement.
Well, that's remarkably similar sounding. I don't know if you've had a chance to read for yourself the much circulated New York Times Magazine piece this morning.
I have not read it yet, no.
Well, the lead of the article is very interesting. I was a little bit baffled, not having read any of it yet, but when I started reading it here, that it takes place in Germany, but it's an almost exact parallel of that very story that the Russians picked up on a story fueled by rumors mostly of a 13-year-old girl kidnapped and raped by Arab migrants, and they pick it up and run with it and go wild at that point. Now, I hate to do this to you, but at the point at which you joined us is right before our last break. So,
well, I called in
take
late.
that.
It's my own fault.
I am so sorry to have to do it to you this way, but let me get our music going, and we'll take a short 2-minute break, gather our wits about us from the shock of having to take this break, and come back on the other side with more from Joan McCarter. Hang on just a moment. We'll be back in 2 minutes. Welcome back to the Kagro in the Morning Show on Netroots Radio. Joan McCarter, senior political writer with Daily Kos, is still with us. Thank you for hanging on during the break. We solved some mysteries over the break. I'm going to let Joan tell you she's got the answer to the mystery of Ken Bone's appearance at Roots Nation. Many of you who were there, maybe you know this, but I didn't. What happened exactly?
Sam B's full frontal was there. Not Sam B herself, unfortunately. I would have rather have her
nice.
than Ken Bone, but
sure,
she had a team there, and they brought in Ken Bone because funny, I guess.
Okay, well that does make more sense.
In his red sweater.
Yeah, of course. Otherwise, how would you know?
Yeah.
I mean,
so that
is a little bizarre.
If it hasn't aired already, it should be in the next week or two.
Yeah, okay. I would like to see that.
We got lots of warnings, like at the pub quiz. They were
Oh.
pub quiz filming. We got lots of warnings about not telling people what happened before it happened because it was going to air sometime in September.
See. Oh, okay. Well, I don't think I don't think he gave anything up, but that makes sense that they would bring him there. It didn't make sense to me that Ken Bone was sitting at home saying, "Oh, look at this. I should go to this. Yeah, I should go to this progressive gathering here because I don't really know anything about how I feel about stuff, and maybe they'll convince me."
It did seem rather random.
Yeah.
It was random for us, too.
Yeah, well, I'll bet. All right, well. It must have been interesting. We'll see what the product of this is at some point. I'll have to keep an eye out for it. Let me know when that happens.
Will do.
So let's see. So it was interesting parallels we were talking about between the Twin Falls story and the beginning of this story in the New York Times Magazine today. That basically it's the same play. And it shouldn't be surprising there. And we were also musing during the break about it may be then that Russians don't necessarily or didn't necessarily need help directly from the Trump campaign or anyone associated with it in order to do at least some of their targeting. Some of it stuff is just out there for free. If you look at InfoWars, they'll tell you where the weirdos reside, what they believe in, and how you can incite them to rage. And although that doesn't explain the amount of money and time that the Trump campaign spent on big data style targeting either, but maybe they were providing that to InfoWars for all we know, and InfoWars ends up being the conduit to Russia, wittingly or unwittingly. I don't know. But we'll learn more about that, no doubt, as the investigation continues. But,
we should, yeah.
I hope so. Much more, of course, happening out there. I know you said you had spent your morning on getting the news of the Bernie Sanders bill up on. Are we up on the front page with it yet at this point?
I don't know that it's up on the front page yet, but it's on my page.
Yes. So aging, mellowing will be rolled out shortly, I'm sure.
It's got to be proofread.
Okay, well, we do like to do that because real news and all that.
Yes.
Okay,
and you know, Greg really did set the stage well for it. We're not looking at this as the be-all, end-all bill. It's the start, and it's a very good start because, you know, as Greg said, we've got Max Baucus, we've got John Tester, we've got Joe Manchin all saying, we should be talking about single payer. They're not ready to say we should be doing single payer, but they're saying it should be part of the discussion. And Medicare for All is a very, very good start for that discussion.
Okay. I'm willing to start there. And I mean, we don't know that it'll get anywhere just because Republicans continue to control Congress.
It won't get anywhere.
But, yeah, I mean,
it won't. But the fact that it's being introduced with a minimum of 15 senators, there are 15 now, and there'll probably be a few more that pile on before it's actually formally introduced, is significant. I mean, that's a third of the conference almost.
Mm-hmm. And, I mean, coming from all the quarters you would think would otherwise have continued to resist, and of course it may very well be the case that should we flip the House and Senate somehow miraculously, they would, lose their nerve, perhaps.
Yeah.
But that's okay.
You have to start somewhere.
Yeah.
And as Greg said, this is incremental. It's starting.
I need to reach Mitch McConnell and get him signed on board. I need to like put the bug in his ear. You know what, Mitch? This would be one of those great things where you could totally embarrass Democrats by bringing this bill to the floor and actually forcing a vote on it.
Well,
That's
they
actually
actually
something you might
did
think
try
about
that.
Yeah, they've done that
in
the
the marathon of voting, the vote-a-rama that led up to John McCain killing their hopes for Obamacare repeal.
Yeah.
Steve Daines from
There you
Montana
go.
offered a Medicare for All amendment.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't real. Democrats didn't fall for it.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Well,
they have played that political game
yeah,
before.
okay. So that they're open to it. It would be fun to do that, and then also to kind of say to him, like a few days later, yeah, you know what was a really crazy surprise? That whole McCain thing where you had no idea how he was going to vote, and then at the last minute he changed his mind, and it became a huge, huge disaster for your party. I hope you don't, to consider that side by side with the plan I just gave you, and that you put in motion to bring this to the floor. Anyway. Well,
that was fun.
Chuck Schumer, he could do these sorts of things. Over lunch.
Speaking of repeal,
yes,
they're still at it.
Okay. Status?
I counted, and I think there's 10 working days.
Yeah.
If
all right.
they stay in on Fridays.
Ooh.
Which
they don't like that.
Next Friday they won't. Rosh Hashanah.
Yeah.
So they're out next Thursday and Friday. But Lindsey Graham and Bill Cassidy and Dean Heller are still trying, and Mitch McConnell hasn't told them stop it yet. So for the next 2 weeks, we're still going to be talking about this, even though it's really, really, really unlikely to happen.
Is it also undrafted? I was pretty sure that they still hadn't committed their idea to paper.
Well, supposedly they
sure
have.
that you
It was
say
supposed to have come out Monday. Now they're saying it's going to happen today.
Does Trump say that? 2 weeks, very shortly.
2 weeks. 2 weeks. So along with Medicare for All, we're going to get repeal Obamacare, which should be fun, which is essentially let's just block grant the whole thing. But because we want to have Dean Heller sign on, we'll give extra money to Nevada.
Oh, okay. Sure.
That'll go over well. It is a very big shift of funds from blue states to purple and red states.
I see.
And when you're getting to the point where you're talking about taking away from one state to give to another, I think they're going to have a hard time finding 50 votes.
That's true. Those make things difficult. That whole representing states thing.
Yeah.
Those founders.
And I think in this case, Murkowski's state doesn't come out quite as well.
Oh,
and they had the Klondike giveaway and all of the various things. Klondike kickback, that's what they called it.
Okay.
Previously, it wasn't enough to get Murkowski. This isn't going to be enough to get Murkowski.
Okay. What do we call the Nevada thing?
So you start with those two already saying, yeah, no. Rand Paul has said no, but Rand Paul is Rand Paul, and he can change his mind, and does change his mind.
Sure.
John McCain says not without regular order, but
okay.
John McCain has been known to change his mind too.
That's true. Yeah.
This is pretty much impossible to happen in regular order in the next 2 weeks. Having hearings, having everybody have their say, getting the expert testimony there, getting the CBO report. It's not going to be good. It's going to be bad. For them.
For them, yes. Okay, well, that's to be expected. It's usually a terrible thing to take people's health care away from them.
Yeah. Bringing it to the floor, having the amendment process, all of that.
Yeah.
They would have to work very, 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 very hard to get all of that done by the end of the month.
And it too would have to be brought under reconciliation. Is that their plan?
Well, they only have until September 30th to do it under reconciliation.
Because, I mean, it's quite honestly, by the time they get this thing down on paper, it could take 10 days for the parliamentarian to figure out whether it's in order.
Well, presumably they've been working with the parliamentarian. That's what they were trying to do previously.
Okay.
But yes, they are doing it under reconciliation because the budget reconciliation to repeal Obamacare expires on September 30th.
Yes, that's what we've been told from the parliamentarian's office. So we'll take that for whatever it's worth. 10 days to get to that, 10 working days before that comes up. That's essentially, I don't know, that's well within striking range of like a Votorama filibuster. Right there, even if they were to get it to the floor. But the chances of them actually getting floor time on the thing, I don't know. I mean, with a serious chance of passage, do you think that they will humor them and say, on September 29th or whatever the appropriate date would be, let's have a vote on the thing?
Well, that's a Friday, so it would have to be September 29th.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, I mean, they could come in Saturday. They've done Saturday sessions before, but. Are they going to do it for
end
this?
Of the fiscal year? Yeah, I mean, if they know it's going to crash, they might say, how about Thursday afternoon? Is that good for you?
The other thing is that they are all of the committee types and leadership is tied up in trying to figure out if they're going to have a tax plan.
Oh, but it's moving beautifully.
And again, budget reconciliation comes into play because they want to do it under budget reconciliation, which means they have to have a budget.
Yeah, that's one of the major necessities of budget reconciliation. You got to have those instructions.
Yeah, and if they meet their deadline of doing that by the end of this year, then they're all kind of preoccupied with trying to make that happen. Although, of course, they don't have a plan yet.
No, even
though...
It
sounds very familiar, doesn't it?
Yes. The president is certain that it's, not only do they have a plan, but it's moving very rapidly through Congress because it's super popular.
And it's a great plan.
Yeah. It's the same one as the health care plan. It has to be enacted
because of Harvey and Irma.
Yeah,
which makes a whole lot of sense.
Right. Well, in his world, it does.
It's an interesting interpretation of shock doctrine.
I guess so. Yeah. I mean,
I think it's lacking some of the nuance that we've seen in the past.
Yes, he just goes right to it. I mean, for a guy like Trump, I mean, this is really true. Without exaggeration, for Trump, a hurricane it's a tax event. For him, yeah. It's like, okay, a hurricane is coming. It's hitting Florida. That means, it used to mean when I was a private citizen, that no one blinks when I say there's $17 million of damage done to Mar-a-Lago and the government needs to reimburse me or give me tax breaks to do the fixing, even when nothing has happened to Mar-a-Lago. It'll be a little more difficult to get away with now in terms of not being noticed by the press, but on the other hand, easier to get away with in the sense that he can tell people, approve this or you're fired from the government, and probably get away with it.
Probably.
At least for the time being. So yeah, when they say the rich are different, this is one of the ways in which they are different. A natural disaster for everybody else is, oh my God, I need to deal with fixing my house. Whereas for people who own several homes or large vacation compounds or compounds, complexes, whatever you want to call them, it's an opportunity to loot the government based on false claims of damage that, usually just don't get called out.
Oh, horrible, horrible story this morning, and I just saw a snippet of it.
Oh.
And I think it was the Houston Chronicle about as mold spreads, Houston's poor are ordered to move, but they don't have anywhere to go. Embedded in the story was this: at least 9 of the sprawling complexes. This is a complex of an apartment rental complex in Houston.
Yeah.
At least 9 of the sprawling complexes buildings at 8500 Nairn have remained vacant and boarded up since a tornado struck over Memorial Day weekend 2 years ago.
Oh, yeah.
According to city records. But civil court documents from a 2015 breach of contracts lawsuit show that the owner of those apartment buildings received at least $7.7 million in insurance payouts.
Yeah.
Got the money, didn't use it to fix up the apartment buildings. Those renters are still out of luck.
It's pretty amazing what people get away with, and that says it happens so frequently. I mean, that's part of the cover, I guess. You can't track it all
because
down.
it's happening to poor people.
Yeah, and that poor people don't make news this way.
Yeah.
But Mar-a-Lago very quickly gets $17 million worth of relief for damage that didn't happen.
That didn't happen.
To a very habitable house, of course, or whatever. But yeah, it's the same story as the aftermath of Katrina. All of these disasters bring these things up. The very slow recovery and no interest in seeing repairs made. And I think I just saw Jared Kushner take off in a helicopter and head to Houston to buy these apartment complexes.
Yeah.
It's his kind of thing. That's not likely to get you in trouble in this administration. It's just envy you.
Well, and unfortunately in previous administrations as well.
That's true. It all happened under previous administrations. So, I mean, this is just a carryover, I guess, if you're going to lay it at the feet of the administration. But I don't know that there was anybody who was advising the prior president while, slumlording himself. But maybe, who knows? It's hard to ferret this stuff out. It's just easier to see with these guys because they don't care if people know it. Well, that's a sad story, and likely only to get worse. As how are they doing in draining Houston? I mean,
Irma took all of the attention away.
Yeah.
I think Houston is drained. As of a couple of days ago, Beaumont still didn't have drinking water.
Yeah, we're real good at restoring good drinking water in this country too. Another real feather in our cap. No progress, by the way, in Flint, as far as anyone can tell, either.
Yeah, that too.
So we have some serious black eyes in our infrastructure issues. What happened to Infrastructure Week? Didn't it fix that? I can't believe that that's not done.
I know.
I really actually
He
kind of
devoted a whole week to it.
Well, that's true.
Except for the part where he was talking about how both sides
right are
bad.
Fine people, though. Some of them are fine people. Yeah, that's true. I kind of really I thought if there was ever a chance of Trump doing something unexpectedly good, that like he would step in, and I had entertained some thoughts of him like whipping the Flint, Michigan water problem into shape and saying, "See, I get things done," and that would have been really interesting and would have made for such difficult political straits for his opponents to see him step in and fix that thing because I'm a doer and I'm a billionaire and I move money and he could have put all his attention into it, but he's such a lazy slob.
And that one would have been easy because a lot of the fixing of it had been figured out how it was going to happen.
Yeah.
So he was already halfway there on that one.
Well, he likes golf.
There was the hope that he would do something with infrastructure because, builder seems like something he would be able to understand. And then the thought that, he could have Donald J. Trump Highway.
Yeah, oh yeah.
On every highway across the nation.
Every single one.
Bridge or a water plant or...
Yeah. Well, he really could have. And there was, for a brief moment, there were Democrats willing to say, well, of all the things he's proposing, that's the one I'm most willing to work with him on. Of course, we told everybody, be careful or don't do it at all. And then, of course, the plan turned out to be, to the extent that it existed at all, turned out to be a privatization garbage as usual. But anyway... wow. Well, so many things not working just because the president doesn't know or understand or care about government. I didn't think that was going to be such a problem. But I'm surprised by everything every day. Well, let's see what other items have caught your eye. That's interesting.
Well, I'm still thinking a lot about Equifax.
Yeah.
And I'm still really not very happy with Equifax.
The basic story of the
basic story and the personal story that I was one of the people, as far as we know, because it's really hard to tell from their website, which was somewhat random.
Yeah. Oh, I heard that the widget they put up to check, just basically no matter what you put in, it says, yeah, your data was lost.
Well, I put mom in and she wasn't, but
Oh, okay.
other people put random things in and it came back yes. So I think that you can go with the assumption that, yeah, you were one of the people because
Probably.
143 million people.
Yeah, that's about everybody.
Yeah. And
probably
then
everybody who
to
has
have
credit
to,
reports.
depends on what state you live in, but if you want to freeze your credit reports from them so that nobody else can try to open up an account in your name, you got to pay. And it's varying depending on what state you live in. In in Idaho, it's $6. I had to pay
terrible.
Equifax $6 to keep them from screwing up again and releasing my info again.
Wow. And I'm guessing you didn't send them cash in the mail for this. You probably had to,
use a credit card? Yeah.
But this time we'll totally. Okay. Well, that is pretty worrisome, I'm sure, for everybody. I did see that you had another story that mentioned them in the headline, that they have the federal contract.
Guess what they also do?
Well,
they get a lot of taxpayer money in order to secure all of the data and to confirm all of the data of people applying for Obamacare.
I guess that should not come as a huge surprise, but I can't believe that I hadn't heard that blared in the headlines, or tweeted about by Donald Trump, saying that's what I'm trying to save you from. You see, they missed that opportunity, at least to date, but it is only Wednesday.
Well, he's not going to be picking on Equifax.
Well,
I mean, why would he?
He's mavericky and independent.
He doesn't care.
He's Teddy Roosevelt, for God's sake.
And you probably have this week already talked about that weekend's worth of news about Maverick Donald Trump.
Yes.
But
sure.
Seriously.
They really are. There's a lot of people who are just sort of desperate for that storyline for whatever reason, and I'm not sure exactly what the root cause of it is, but I mean, man, just like they couldn't stop with the Hillary Clinton email story, they just get a bug and they're like, God, that's just the story, even if there's no proof of it or no interest in it, even if it's true. Or whatever, but boy, did they really they cannot wait for the pivot, the reset, the today he became president story, and
they just can't. And we're going to get a whole book of it from the New York Times reporters Haberman and Thrush.
It's really interesting why I cannot figure out why that happens. I mean, the guy has lived his life in public for a long time. He's got a lot of.
If there's anybody we know, it's Donald Trump. I mean, there are patterns established here.
Yeah, I don't.
The only reason there's more than one reason why he decided he would screw over Paul Ryan and Mitch McConnell and agree with Chuck and Nancy. Because he wanted to screw over Ryan and McConnell.
Yeah, he doesn't like them, and he never has, and. I mean, I guess that's easy to forget as a political reporter because they're all Republicans and they weren't stabbing each other in the back in public in the 7 months since inauguration. But the 7 months prior to that, he was denouncing them at rallies. So I don't really know why that
he's been tweeting his civil war with them for the past 3 months.
Sure, that's true. I guess from time to time we are reminded of it. It's like we didn't want to see it. I already forgot, so there you go.
He was sitting in that meeting. They were arguing. He was bored with it. He was going to be the boss. He took the easy way out and could also screw McConnell and Ryan, which he likes to do. So really reading more into it than that is pretty ridiculous. It's really stretching.
Yeah. Well, we're constantly warned not to try to look for machinations and deep motivations from him, and we should take that advice, or everyone else should anyway. It seems obvious to me, but I don't know. Every once in a while, I forget it too. But I wish they wouldn't. Phew. Well, yeah, we'll see more of it, no doubt. And it reminded me of something. I had an idea flash in my head and disappear as I was thinking it through. But okay, we are getting close to the end of the show as it is. I guess a few minutes to squeeze in anything else that might be coming up or we might have missed today.
Well, I just do want to put in a plug in there. People really should probably freeze their accounts. Okay. They have to pay money to do it, but go to Equifax, TransUnion, and
freeze those.
I'm blanking on the third one.
Oh.
And put a freeze on your accounts.
I guess I should take that advice and check. Yeah, but
and you probably should also make sure that you have all the fraud notifications set for your credit cards.
Well, good advice.
And you're going to have to do this for years and years and years and years to come because they've got everything.
That's okay.
Cheery, huh?
So happy September.
They have your social security number, your date of birth, and your name.
Yeah,
they can, and that's not going to change ever. So
there's no way to block it. I noticed that when they had their widget online, that they were asking rather than the usual last 4 of the social security, they wanted the last 6. Is that why? How come? I mean, I guess if you have all the social security numbers in the world in your database, I guess the last 4 doesn't necessarily hack it. But
yeah,
that one struck me as like, oh, well, I guess that just tells me about the scale of the breach, I guess.
I know well, and I think that they were doing it on the cheap and easy.
Oh,
so
okay. Well, no surprise there. Okay, well, that was a little bit depressing, but I guess well worth spending the last minute on it. It's going to affect a lot of lives, and yours and
will
mine
for
included.
Years to come. So yeah, sorry guys.
Oh well, it's you get good life advice here on the show as well as the news. So thanks, Joan. And
You're welcome.
Take care. Good luck getting all of that frozen and taken care of.
Oh, and don't buy the new iPhone with face recognition. That's bad.
Okay. I wasn't about to, but I did. That's starting to break out now, too. A lot of interesting stories about the use of technology and some of the horrible things. And I did see somebody already saying, please, this is going to turn out to be like somehow racially biased as well. And it's not
of course it is. You saw the thing with the soap dispensers, right?
Yeah, exactly what I was talking about. My kids were fascinated by that story and a few others, and I'm sure that horror story is yet to come. Well, thanks for the warnings.
You're most welcome.
And we will talk again next week.
All right, bye-bye.
Take care, Joan. Joan McCarter, our senior political writer, with her eye on just about everything out there in the world, not just the politics or what's happening in Congress. Were you in line to buy the new iPhone, everybody? I don't know. Probably not. I may hold off on that one, like forever or something. In the meantime, let's catch up on what's on tap for the after show, mopping up and batting cleanup for us having wasted our time, frittered our time away on all the things that aren't immediately breaking news. Let's get our update from Justice on today's episode. A Kentucky student is targeted by a white nationalist, Trump-loving classmate for deportation, and her university won't help. Sunayana Dumala's husband murdered in a hate crime, and now the Trump administration wants to deport her. And no one could have imagined that Neil Gorsuch would be the deciding vote as the Supreme Court restores Texas's gerrymandered maps. Last half of today's show, visit with Angela Marks, a.k.a. Angie in Washington State, for a political and world news roundup that is the epitome of the fire and fury such as the world has never seen before. I like that tagline, Angie.
From Daily Kos Radio on netrootsradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show
with David Waldman.
Thanks for listening today. We've got a lot to think about and a lot of reading you're going to have to do on your own, unfortunately. Scott Anderson will help us wrap all of that up. We will be back tomorrow for one more shot with Greg Dworkin before heading into our Friday show. I'm already looking ahead to the end of the week. Stay tuned now for the after show right here on Netroots Radio. We'll see you tomorrow.